Every Monday night over on the second floor of Dock-It, where the tweens lab up there is transformed into a pirate's lair. Let's see what that's all about.
Coding Pirates is from 2014, and the idea was to create a community for kids to share their interest in technology.
My name is Mathias Jørgensen, and we are the Coding Pirates! Yeah!
We have around 2,000 kids spread across the entire country. We're a club, just as we have other sports clubs, soccer, handball, badminton. And while they play, they learn a lot. They program, they build robots, they make 3D prints, they work with all kinds of technology. It's about the kids acquiring some skills that they cannot acquire elsewhere. In the primary school or in the secondary school, we don't have courses dedicated to teach these skills. I think one of the big ideas is to prepare these kids for this future digital community, which is just growing and growing. Yeah, I mean, we need smart people to be able to exploit these technologies and come up with these solutions. Coding Pirates is from
Mathias, who we saw in that film, is one of 1,000 volunteers across Denmark who works with Coding Pirates, and he's a busy guy. He told me that in spite of the fact that he's a PhD in nanoscience, nanotechnology, he finds time to be a pirate captain because it feels great to do good. And doing good's something that drives our final speaker today also. He's the founding editor and publisher of a magazine called Good Magazine. He's the executive chairman today at something called Good and Upworthy Media. You've probably heard of those online because they're two of the biggest online media companies. They do branded content, and they work with brands to help them figure out how to create campaigns and content and projects that are aimed at, as they say on their website, appeal to educated, affluent millennials who give a damn. So with that, Max Shore, welcome to Aarhus.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Max, and I'm the co-founder of Good. And it truly is an honor to be here in your beautiful city hall here as we're kicking off Internet Week, and to hear from your mayor about the importance of being present in the present moment at a time where digital is becoming a bigger part of our lives. You know, government really is the driver of this growth in so many ways. And we also heard from business about how this engine for growth and the importance of digital literacy, and from the alderman about the need for our young people to learn how to co-create these technologies. And I want to share a little bit about my story, starting Good and building Good, and also a little bit of perspective on this digital transformation. There are sort of three key parts to my talk. One is intention, thinking a little bit about our intention. How do we engage this moment? The second is consciousness. How do we keep our minds in a clear and present way to engage a world where technology is vying for more of our attention? And action. How do we show up in the world, and what can we do, and how can we harness this incredible technology for good? So these are handmade buttons from Good, which we started as we were starting our media company. And at the time, the word good was kind of made fun of. People thought good was soft or weak, and it was far from cool. And I started this company with two other millennials, and we were very interested in showing how good was the coolest thing around. And this is the office, this little tiny room in Los Angeles where we started Good. Face to face, backs up against the wall. We worked all day and all night, pretty anonymous in this little place. And we had this dream that, you know, good would change and that it would become a culturally cool and pervasive thing, and that business would learn how to be a force for good. And we were dreaming, we were young, we were 24, 25. And that's a little thermometer. Whenever somebody subscribed to our print magazine, $20 went to the nonprofit of their choice. And we had sort of coerced some of our friends to sign up. And yet we sort of knew as millennials, with the internet taking over, that starting a print magazine in the 21st century was going to be an interesting journey. Soon after, Steve Jobs got on the stage in January of 2007, and he lifted up the iPhone, and he introduced this, and he said, "Your life in your pocket," and that this was quite a tool that we would see more of. And in the last 10 years, we all know we have seen more of it. I mean, how many people here have a smartphone? If you do, okay, so the people who aren't raising their hands, I'm interested if they actually don't have a smartphone, but a lot of us do, and it's become a very intimate thing. But just a couple of months before this release, we launched Good Magazine. And we launched it as a print magazine in the fall of 2006, with the first cover said, "Blank like you give a damn." And it was a conversation with the audience. We said, we don't care what you care about, but whatever it is, put your back into it, put your heart into it. And that was the sort of founding inspiration. And we started it, and it immediately hit the right moment, and it sort of hit the cultural zeitgeist. A lot of people had this same idea because of the internet, because of all the access to information that we have. People were interested, just like our last speaker, in saying, how does our company become a force for good? How do we create the life or the company or the society that we want to be a part of? And so Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, just showed up at our office right after that. And he said he had left his company. His company had become ubiquitous the world over, but it grew too fast, and it became too soulless and faceless. And so he wanted to go back and be in charge again. And he said this to us. He said, you really have to have this belief 100%. And we had that, and he saw it, and he had it as well. And he went back, and then he led huge growth at Starbucks over the last decade. And he really brought the purpose. They made it a little smaller. They sort of localized it a little bit. I know, and he came and he gave us some really good advice. He said, what you're doing is exactly right, but you need to block out all the noise and have laser focus. And he said that with a lot of clarity. He was motivated. He went and he did that. We've been working on that. But one of the things we saw when we were starting Good was a skinny senator from Illinois who was inspiring people. We decided to start filming him before he decided to run for president. And it ended up becoming this movie called By the People, which loads of footage and this wonderful story of the campaign of the rise of Barack Obama as an unprecedented president. Times have changed a lot in America, but we made this film, and we felt like what had been our 100-year project of making good cool sort of had hit the speed lane. And here was this president who embodied that and who was earning some of the respect around the world. And we sold the movie to HBO. And oh, this last one is kind of fun. Then the White House created the first digital office. It's not something the White House had had to do before. And in that office, they decided they were going to use social media to ask questions, kind of like we're doing today, where people can fill out polls. And so the first time they did that, they thanked Good for the inspiration, because as you saw in our first cover, it was a dialogue, but we were also early users of social media, creating a two-way communication, which is obviously becoming a big disruptive force that we need to turn into our advantage. And so this was Google, the first time they used their homepage to do something overtly pro-social. They came to us. Their co-founders had randomly shown up at our launch party because they also felt, how can we be a force for good with this company we created that has more power than we ever imagined when we were PhD students? And they said, we really want to keep the internet open and free, so we blacked out the Google, and we designed this infographic and call to action. And over 7 million people signed it in one day, which was a record, and a US senator was quoted in the New York Times saying, the way citizens engage their government will never be the same. So that was kind of crazy. We're this little group of millennials out in Los Angeles, and we start with this idea, and all of a sudden it feels like the sun is shining. This is an idea whose time has come, and we're not just making a media company that's reaching more and more people, but we're also beginning to interface with some of the most powerful institutions of the world, and we're finding they really want to be a force for good, but they need a little help and design, and we all need to figure out how we can work together to make this happen. And so part of this is, we heard from a previous speaker who was born in 1979. I was born in 1980, a year later, and sometimes I'm called a millennial as a result from the 1980s. And so most of us in this room can remember growing up without a smartphone. We can remember when we had to arrange a meeting, when we had to learn information from an encyclopedia or the card catalog at the library, or ways that are sort of old-fashioned all of a sudden. But then the internet came around, and we had all of this access to possibility and information. And millennials have been said time and time again to be the largest and most socially conscious generation in the history of the world. And so how does that get organized? How does that come to be? And this isn't just a story of millennials. This is a story of society as we have access to information, as we can see problems in real time, and we have more and more tools and ability to do something about it. So business is realizing it also has to be a part of the solution. And yet we're still in a little bit of a mess. We have oil spills, we have externalities that we have to deal with as a culture and a society. And we have companies that really need to focus on profit, even if they want to do good. And so as business is realizing how is it part of the solution, how do we interface with that? And so this is me in 2015, about 3 years ago, almost exactly. And I was getting over 1,000 emails a day. We were doing okay, and the UN had kind of given me the sense they wanted help with a big climate project around the Paris Climate Summit. And I had a moment to catch my breath. I'm in Montreal here, outside by a lake, and I'm just digesting everything that's happening, and I'm trying to. Maybe some of you have had a feeling of this sometimes when you're checking email a lot and you finally get a chance to rest and relax. And so this is kind of the second one. So first there's intention. And when we started Good, we had this intention. How can we be a force for good? How can we align doing good and doing well? That was our intention. I think intention is really important here as we start Internet Week, as we think about this incredible technology that is shaping our world all around us. What is our intention with how we interface with this technology and how we contribute to society? The second one was consciousness. How do we physiologically get ourselves in a place where we can be present, like your wonderful mayor has said? How can we be present for the people we care most about, for our lives? And so this was a moment where I was trying to recalibrate. And I think recalibration is one of the things that is happening now, and we're all finding, how do we find our balance, and how do we find our presence? And from this, I think of the Serenity Prayer. We heard one of the speakers talking about what to worry about. And I think there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of concern of, are our jobs going to be taken away? Are our children's minds going to be endlessly scattered? And all of these various considerations. But I love this Serenity Prayer, which is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Some people in this room, or maybe your parents, or people you know, might wish that this did not exist, or that screens weren't a threat, or that jobs weren't going to robots. But a lot of this is happening, and we can't do anything about it. But there is a lot that we can do in terms of how we show up, and how we engage it, and how we create a generation that has the right perspective around technology and the ability to make incredible technology. So I think this is an important framing. And on the lawn there, I was trying to realize, how do we do this? How do we show up and do something? And for the Paris Climate Summit, they said everything is lining up for an international agreement. But the problem is the public is not paying attention, and the public's voice is not a part of this. How can we get the public involved? And so we came up with this concept, Earth to Paris, and we brought it, very simple, we brought it to the UN, and they loved it, and they said, we want to do this. It was late September already, and the summit was in December. And so we put out this call to our friends, and we asked their creativity, whatever your message is, send it from Earth to Paris. And then the UN said, OK, you have 10 days. We need a video in 10 days. And we created this video.
Hi, I'm Jack Black. I'm here to talk about the Earth.
This is not about a celebrity inspiring you to take part, or a company trying to sell you something. This isn't about the Pope, or Lil Bub, or a cute internet hedgehog. This isn't even about saving the spotted owl, or a tree, or even a country. This is about all of us. Everything we know, everyone we love, and our survival. Never before have we had to face a challenge as big as climate change. And never before have we had a moment like this, with the awareness, the will, and the technology to fight it. This is the turning point. This December, the Paris Climate Conference will bring together leaders and experts from over 190 nations to combat climate change. But the outcome remains unclear, which is why world leaders need to hear from us now. Use the hashtag to send a message from Earth to Paris. Tweet, Instagram, march, paint, sing. Bring your voice and your creativity. Tell our leaders to make bold commitments to combat climate change. It's time for world leaders to hear from the world.
So we made that in 10 days, including sending messages out to friends all around the world and getting those initial creative submissions. And then we put this online on Facebook, and it started getting over 1 million views a day. And it quickly became the most viewed and shared video the UN had made. And it was getting over 1 million views a day. And then the Paris terrorist attack happened. And we had to kind of hit pause on the whole campaign. We didn't even know if the Paris Climate Summit was going to happen. But these experiments in real-time connectivity and consciousness are just incredible, where if you design a call to action and a summit, there had never been a summit that was so important that connected people. And we were able to design this video that really played into it. So there's endless possibility there. And now, several years later, we're designing how can cities like Aarhus and Copenhagen be an engine for climate change, and how can people such as you, and it's wonderful to be here in Denmark where you're doing that, but we had influencers just raising their hand and saying, this is part of my voice. At a time where most people see the evidence, the science behind climate change and want to do something, it can feel powerless sometimes when you can't do it. But through the internet and connectivity and designing a campaign like this, we got tens and tens of thousands of people to create customized messages and raise their hand. And then Morgan Freeman narrated a video as the voice of the world, and the negotiators were able to break through there. And we built this coalition, which was incredible too. It was over 100 organizations. It included the UN, it included the city of Paris, it also included Facebook and Twitter. And we integrated with all the marches that happened all around the world. And then we showed up at the White House. They invited us when they heard about our coalition. And we met in the Roosevelt Room. And they said, we wanted to go bold, but a coalition like this helps us go even bolder. So it was incredibly inspiring. And really it taps into just the mission of what we've been doing for the last decade, which is how can we help people be a force for good, and how can we help business be a force for good? And what's exciting is you can create content that is so shareable around topics that matter. And this last year, we combined forces with a company called Upworthy, which is very skillful at doing so. But then also, how do you activate people around these issues that matter? And we're reaching this audience, and you've probably seen a millennial or somebody looking at their phone, and it's a little bit annoying. And so there's this double-edged sword that we're all here convening about of we're distracted, we're in our phones, and there's a chance that we can all really do something amazing. And 97% of the millennials we reach say a company's commitment to progress really matters to them. So this is the vast, vast majority of people. So speakers like our last one are thinking, how can our company be the company our customers want? How can we be a good company? And you've got this overwhelming rising tide of people who say, we want you to do that. And so part of the magic right now is just helping these companies push it over the edge so they really can do this, and we can see a lot of progress. And I'm thinking of this quote. William Blake asked this question over 200 years ago. He was looking at the skylines around here, and he saw a lot of smoke. We don't see so much today on this beautiful day here in Aarhus, but he asked, was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? And he wondered, with all this disruptive progress that's happening, we're also seeing some pollution. And how can we do it? Can we build a beautiful town or city, a sacred place, in the midst of this polluting, toxic fumes that probably made it hard to breathe? It's a really interesting question for us to ask now in present-day Aarhus, or wherever we live, is can we build a better community? Can we unleash this technology, which we know has incredible benefits? Undoubtedly, this engine also had its incredible benefits. But what about the pollution? What about the side effects? What about the problems of it? How do we manage that? And it's truly great to be in this room with people who are wrestling with this. And 150 is a number that comes up, I think, in the context of our new challenge, which is millennials are checking their phone 150 times a day, nonstop. And many of you likely are too. I often am. And I can see it with my sister and her husband live here in Aarhus, and they have these wonderful 3 kids. But if left to their own devices, the kids will just be on YouTube, on their iPad, and they love it, love it, love it. And I know the aldermans here and the schools are doing a wonderful job or doing their best to introduce the technology and the literacy while also finding this right balance of a consciousness. But 150 times a day. So can we build Jerusalem here in this context? Or just a great place to live? And there's a movement taking off in the Bay Area that's wonderful, that's called Time Well Spent. And it's the Center for Humane Technology. It's terrific. I really recommend going to that website, humanetech.com. And they've created this emblem of designed for time well spent. And I think this is part of my intention, circling back to intention, consciousness, and action as we prepare to kind of conclude this talk. Time well spent is an intention. I want my life to be time well spent. When I'm with people I care about, I want it to be time well spent. When I'm on technology, I want it to be time well spent. And time well spent was started by Tristan Harris, who was a design ethicist at Google, looking at the issues, and he realized at Google and at Facebook, they're brilliant people looking at how do we make this technology as addictive as possible or as contagious as possible. And there were challenges with that as well. So the business imperative is to make people watch their phones 150 times or more a day. But there's some side effects to that, like those power stacks with the coal smoke flushing out. So there's a question of how do we take control? What's our intention for our time in a world where we have these devices, but we have a limited amount of time? And this is a project, actually, my sister, Sarah, is doing here in Aarhus, which is you have some beautiful places on the Kattegat Sea where at the water's edge. And there was a wonderful article recently in the New York Times about how water is one of the last unplugged spaces. And I know at some of your clubs here, there are places that are social media free zones. And so as we all try to find our patterns for protecting our consciousness so we can be present in the present moment, some of you may take a dip in the Kattegat Sea in January. Some of you may take it in July. Some of you may walk in the woods. Some of you may meditate. Whatever it is that you do, we all need to find our way to recalibrate our consciousness and make sure that we're present in this present moment. And these are 2 things that Time Well Spent recommend, and I've played around. It's really helped me. One is experimenting with turning your phone into grayscale mode. You don't have to do it all the time, but by turning your phone from the color mode to grayscale, it just takes away the edge of sort of the heroin dose or the addictive quality, and it gives you a real window in to just see, wow, I am addicted, and when I do this, I'm a little less addicted. And I think this empowering consciousness is subtle, but it helps. And certainly, the second one that people know about, but the default setting when you buy your phones or you give phones to your kids is that you have notifications hitting you all the time through various apps. And so just going in and consciously turning the notifications so that they don't bother you, it's something that I did that has really helped me be a little bit less distracted. So there are the various tips like this that are becoming more prominent for how we manage this. And it's not something to be embarrassed about if you find that you're checking the phone more than you want. Like it's a natural occurrence because there's machine learning, and there are many, many smart people who are working really hard to make it an experience that you want to keep consuming. And so doing things like this just kind of take you out of that onslaught and give you a little bit more of the driver's seat. And then Wired wrote this article about time well spent saying, ethical tech will require a grassroots revolution. Certainly, I think that's part of what we're here engaging with at City Hall. We have innovators, we have civic leaders, we have business leaders, and we have citizens. And what we need to figure out is how do we get as much of the best of this technology while mitigating the problems. And it's going to take regulation, it's going to take conscious parenting and schooling and business leaders like we've heard from today. It needs all of it. We need to be engaged. The coffee cups, I don't know how many of you had a hard time answering that. It's very difficult. I almost didn't have coffee because I'm not, I was at the World Government Summit last year, and the new Secretary General of the UN said, I'm not an optimist, I'm not a pessimist, I'm just determined. And that's how I feel. You know, obviously we have plenty of reasons to be pessimistic. And obviously we have plenty of reasons to be optimistic. But what we need to do is we need to be really engaged, we need to be vigilant. Think of your own children's beautiful attention when they blow you away by how creative they are, or some little child. We need to protect that consciousness. This is the first young generation that's growing up with all these addictive tools. And we're doing it. We're here in City Hall today dealing with these issues, and it is truly, truly great to be here. So, to summarize, intention. I just want everyone to think for a minute in terms of how much time do I have? A couple minutes? 0. Okay. That's part of this. A lot of us feel like we have 0 time a lot. So I will wrap it up, but just to say again, intention. How do we engage this technology? How do we keep our presence in the present moment? How do we show up for our lives and make sure our time is well spent? Consciousness. What are our rituals or ways that we recalibrate, that we refresh, that we make sure that we can be clear and present and capable to meet the moment? And then action. What do we do in our own personal lives to create this right balance and use of technology? And then how, in the exciting realm of action, can we unleash this technology to drive progress? So thank you so much. It's truly great to be here.
And as you leave, consider again whether you're a digital optimist or pessimist. 67% of you answered in the beginning of this that you're a digital optimist. It'll be interesting to see if that holds. And if it doesn't, then you can maybe update your status as I kind of have by just writing on the cup, you know, it's complicated. Thank you. Enjoy Internet Week.